Hey everybody, Quantum here, and in this video I want to go ahead and take a look at one of the cards coming out in AZURITE C that you can essentially build an entire deck around. We had a similar card like this come out, I think it was in set 5, and initially I thought that this card was going to be worse than the Queen Sensor Core, because the Queen Sensor Core will give you lore, it costs 1 less at 2, it's in amber, but we got this card, King's Sensor Core. It has 2 effects, it is an item, 3 cost inkable. But the first one is Symbol of Royalty. Your Prince and King characters gain resist +1. This effect right here is actually pretty good, and we'll cover why that is in just a moment. It's probably spoiled in the thumbnail of the video, but that's okay, we'll explain it. And then it also has the same effect as the Queen Sensor Core, where Royal Search, where you can exert, pay 2 ink, reveal the top card of your deck. If it's a Prince or King character card, you may put that card into your hand, otherwise you just put it back on the top of your deck. So you have to reveal it, which means your opponent's going to see it. But most of the time, it'll go to your hand if you build the deck the right way. So what I have here is an Amber Steel version of this deck, and we'll kind of cover the cards, and then I'll show you some gameplay against the computer, just to show you the concept of how some of these interactions can work. You're not playing too many Amber cards, only 16. Your majority is going to be Steel, because there is actually a lot of Prince and King characters in Steel. And what's also interesting is you can get away with playing virtually no uninkables, meaning that this deck is very, very easy to continue to play on curve. If you get this item up, not this one, the Sensor Core, the resist +1 can really make your board very difficult to deal with. That being said, you do, as usual with Steel, have a little bit of a weakness to Ruby, especially with board wipes like Be Prepared and sometimes the Big Sisu. But for the most part, you'll be able to go very wide because it'll be very hard for your opponent to deal with your characters, especially if you get more than one King Sensor Core on the board. One of the best interactions with this card is going to be able to turn your Beast Tragic Hero into more than just a sit on board and draw your cards kind of card. With resist +1 or +2, this card can now exert itself to quest and force your opponent to have a direct answer that can get over that resist. And it can also be used to challenge out aggro threats. And you'll see in this AI match or CPU match just how useful that interaction is, where we constantly are able to beat over aggro threats with the Beast Tragic Hero. Supplementing that strategy and maybe protecting cards like the Beast Tragic Hero, you can also play a number of bodyguard characters. So we've opted for the Prince, which has an inherent resist +1 on it already, meaning that the King Sensor Core will give it resist +2, 2 Sensor Cores will give it resist +3. And you can also play one of, in my opinion, the strongest cards in the deck, the Hercules. Not just this bodyguard one, but really this one. I think this is from set 2, yeah, set 2. Hercules Divine Hero has an inherent resist +2. A King Sensor Core makes it have resist +3, meaning your opponent needs something with 6 strength, which, you know, Maui can still run over, in order to take this out. If you have 2 Sensor Cores up, now Maui cannot run over this. And this card is just an insane powerhouse when you start stacking the resist effect on it. You can shift it out early, and if you do that, you just have an insane powerhouse on the board that's extremely difficult to deal with. Now, again, to be fair, Ruby and even some Sapphire cards like Let It Go's and Hades and stuff can deal with the Hercules, but for the most part, it's going to be very difficult to out. Another card that works kind of well with this deck is the Simba Fighting Prince, because this card will be very, very difficult to remove. It's already kind of difficult with its 7 willpower. It is very expensive, but if you're in a grind game, this card can really just clutch up the match, kind of like a Tinkerbell can against aggro decks for you. And this deck is almost like a Steel Simba deck. Some of my choices in here, like Simba, Son of Mufasa, for item or location removal, you can opt to play this or not. This is just an instant banish rather than having to worry about challenging into something or just not being able to deal with an item. You are able to play Mufasa because, again, he is a king character and just a very strong card overall, since you do have a good number of top-end threats that you can play. I've also opted to include Hans. because this card wants to quest, and it's one of the ways that you can deal damage without challenging, because you don't necessarily want to play the Steel Song since they don't synergize well with the King Sensor Core on what you reveal. So a card like this being able to quest and have some protection with resist gets you 2 lore. It's a 3/3 body. Your opponent essentially needs something that's 4 or more strength in order to run over this. Could be pretty good. Benja, again, just more item removal because you can still challenge locations, but having this with the Simba can help. And again, this is a king character. And you're also playing a 2-drop Hercules, which again, is most of the time probably going to be ink because this is the better Hercules to play in most scenarios. But you also have just more ways to facilitate that early shift line because that's how good this Hercules was. When I originally tested this out, I just always found myself wanting to get this card out as soon as possible. And how do you do that? Well, you try to facilitate the shift line. And so just adding more small Hercules is a way to do that. A card like Prince Eric can make its way back into the deck because now your opponent needs something with 4 strength or more in order to run this over. And if they can't run it over, this card's going to get you a lot of value, being a 3/3 that basically comes down for 2. It is a prince, so it does synergize with the deck, but you can argue that, hey, Mr. Smee's just better overall, and yeah, you're right, but Mr. Smee isn't a prince or a king. This card could also be ink, but just putting this on board and having a 3/3 challenger is decent as well. You have the 1-drop and the 2-drop Simbas. You know, the bodyguard effect here is also very relevant, especially again with that resist ability, making this that much harder to out, and also helps facilitate the shift of the new Simba, which again readies up all your characters, and then this thing can have resist, makes it hard to deal with this, meaning that your characters are constantly getting readied, right? So some decent synergies overall with the deck. The link for this deck list will be in the description. The final thing I'll say is in order to deal with some pesky evasive strategies, I did opt to include some Imperial Bows since pretty much every King and Prince character is a hero. This card gives you a decent chance at mopping up those evasive decks. You exert it, you pay 1, and then your chosen hero character gains Challenger and Evasive. You'll probably never need the Challenger against evasive threats, you just need the evasive ability, but sometimes getting that extra little bit of strength on your character could matter in some interactions, so that's nice. Like think for example, giving the Prince +2, right? He becomes a 3/3 body with resist 1, resist 2, resist 3, depending on how many sensor cores you have up. So yeah, this deck is pretty interesting. Some of your non-Prince and King characters are going to be like your Rapunzel. This is one of your card draw engines, but like this deck has 3 card draw engines, and that's really good. It has your Sensor Core, it has your Beast Tragic Hero, and it has a Rapunzel. Very, very solid. Very easy to keep your hand healthy. You have Happy as your 1-drop. I was considering running the Resist 1 Mickey Mouse. I just think that the 2/1 strength stat line is a little bit more relevant, and this has a bit more relevant ability again to deal with evasives in certain scenarios which can come up. But aside from those 2 cards, there's really nothing else in terms of characters, and then you have your items. So you have a very, very high chance of hitting every time with the King Sensor Core. So that's the deck. Yeah, plays very nicely on curve. Let's go ahead and take a look at that concept match against the AI. And we can kind of break that down and explain some of these interactions in real time. So to be honest, I was just messing around and I didn't think that this deck was going to be all too relevant. I was very high up on the Amber Ruby Queen Sensor Core deck, but I definitely wanted to test this out because I think an item like this is very, very interesting. So here you can see me play a 1-drop Simba. We are on the draw against the computer, who is using an Amber Ruby deck, speaking of which. This one is utilizing a bit of a mid-range strategy. Here you can see them drop a 2-drop Lilo after not getting a 1-drop. But this deck is going to be a little bit difficult to deal with because, again, Ruby does give Steel a bit of a hard time. We do end up dropping 2 1-drop Simbas, though. And this Lilo, you know, is just a constant pressure because of its 2-questing ability and its ability to recur itself from the discard pile. So here you'll see again just how good this new Lilo is going to be. So it's kind of like a double showcase. Here we're going to be able to drop the Hercules, so you can see that we're lining up for that shift line like I was talking about in the deck profile portion. It feels kind of bad to have to run over a Lilo with 2 of my Simbas here because you can see here they just play it from the discard for free, but this also tells me that they may not have the strongest hand either. So they play that, and then they play a Mother Gothel, so they're very well positioned for a Rapunzel draw here. I'm going to opt to shift the Hercules though, and this will allow me to constantly just deal with the opponent's board, which again isn't great because I don't necessarily want to have to constantly run over these Lilos that keep coming back, but they'll just start running away with the game if I don't. So they opt to take out one of my Simbas there that I quested with, which is interesting. I leave one of them readied up in case I do want to go with the shift line, but because I'm coming up on 5 ink, I probably want to play the Beast. Having the Sensor Core up first is nice, but being able to drop the Beast here and then drop the Sensor Core will also help you facilitate a line of play where you can now use the Beast as a challenger, especially if you're able to drop a Bodyguard along with it. So here I opt to trade out my Simba because at this point I'm not too worried about the shift line here. I just need to constantly mitigate the pressure, the lore pressure from these Lilos, and I need to build up a decent board state. Interesting by the CPU here to just use the Goofy as an instant 2 lore basically, but passing back to us, we get to draw 2. We're going to go ahead and drop the Sensor Core here, and we do indeed draw into a Bodyguard. So we're going to ink the Simba knowing that this kind of deck is likely not on items and or locations, but the Prince Bodyguard has resist +2 and is protecting our Beast Tragic Hero. So you can see here the Beast now is a direct constant answer to these Lilos because they won't actually damage the Beast, and we'll just constantly run over those Lilos without taking any damage thanks to the resist +1. Now the opponent does end up dropping a Maui here, which is unfortunate, and they only have one card in hand, but I figured the odds that they have a Rapunzel pretty low since they had the Mother Gothel before and they didn't Rapunzel, so I'm probably safe to once again just drop more Bodyguards here and force the Maui to consistently crash into the Bodyguards while I try to build up some advantage and build up a bigger board state so that I can start questing and I don't have to constantly answer these annoying Lilos here. I mean, you're seeing here how relevant these Lilos might become in the metagame. Like, they're just constantly coming back. They're pure card advantage for the opponent. Yes, they lose ink for it, but the opponent's only on 2 cards. I haven't seen their card draw engine in the Rapunzel, and this is one of the deficiencies of Amber Ruby, is that you really do rely on Rapunzel, whereas Amber Steel, like I was telling you about in the deck profile, you have 3 different draw engines in the Rapunzel, Beast Tragic Hero, and the King Sensor Core. You can just see how easy it is and how quickly we're able to replenish our hand here. Now we have a second King Sensor Core that we can potentially play out as well. So we're going to go ahead and drop double Simbas here. I draw, and I guess I discard the Prince because this Maui crashing into the Simba will force the Maui to be taken out. Again, if they had a Rapunzel in this scenario, this would have been a really bad play on my end. And so normally you would not make this, but unless you're pretty confident that your opponent doesn't have a Rapunzel, the fact that they're constantly recurring the Lilos, they haven't played the Rapunzel out earlier, like, they're very unlikely that they had it. So indeed they don't. They end up crashing the Maui. Everything is exerted on their end now. And we have resist +1 still. We drop the Simba Fighting Prince, and this is all I need in order to keep these Lilos in check. So now we're going to be able to consistently run over the Lilo and then take out the other one with the Simba Fighting Prince, thanks to its ability to consistently deal 2 damage. So yeah, we're in a very good state, and unless the opponent is on a Be Prepared in this deck, like, there's absolutely no way that they're going to be able to clean up our board. The Hercules and the Beast Tragic Hero with the resist +1, soon to be resist +2 with the second Sensor Core here, is just too much for them to deal with. So the Goofy comes down, we're going to easily be able to take that out again. The Simba is just such a powerhouse card here. And imagine giving this thing evasive and +2 with the bow card that I was talking about in the deck profile. Like, the Simba will just be able to run over everything, right? And just consistently take out board threats left, right, and center. We drop a second Beast Tragic Hero, and at this point, there's nothing that the opponent can do, really. Again, they need to see it Be Prepared. And then even then, you know, we have the Sensor Core to consistently replenish our hand and get card advantage. So, you know, it's just a foregone conclusion now. I'm only at 6 lore. The opponent is at 14. So, you know, for being very empty-handed for most of the match, they actually did a decent job in kind of threatening to go for game. Like, I did have to consistently check those Lilos, I think. But again, makes it very easy to do. Being able to turn your Beast Tragic Hero into something more than just basically an item that sits on board and draws you cards, actually being able to exert it, protect it with Bodyguard, protect it from some Steel Songs with the resist ability, is pretty relevant here. So obviously this game, like I said, is a foregone conclusion now at this point. So we're just going to quest for game next turn and wrap this up. So again, not the most competitive match because it is against a computer, but I just wanted to show you some of the concepts as to how this works and how much advantage you can generate once you get your game plan rolling and you stabilize a board state. And then getting that Hercules out early, you can see like it dropped, and then it just the opponent couldn't deal with it, right? Because we protected it with bodyguards. Nothing else could really run over it aside from a Maui, and that was pretty much a GG. So let me know what you think in the comment section below if you made it this far. Thank you again for watching. Quantum is out.